Hello and welcome to the Narrowbox Comics channel. Today I am talking about Captain Marvel. Now I don't have a single Captain Marvel book in my collection, so you have Rogue on the cover of this X-Men Legacy. It's a pretty cool picture of Rogue. Yeah, and really today, this is just talking about an article that I read today. Somebody posted on Twitter, and it was about how the Marvels highlights the issue that diverse creators are let down by movie studios. And the article sounded interesting, so I started reading it. But the assertion it made was that diverse creators are held to a higher standard, which is something I had a huge problem with. I didn't like it. They went on to say, Peyton Reed doesn't get torn down for his Ant-Man issues. And so what's the difference there? Well, clearly the only difference it can be is race, right? That's the only difference. It's not that, Ant-Man is a character that has not really been pushed in much the same way as Captain Marvel has, or Black Panther has. He's a mid character who played a role in the original end of the Infinity Saga, and his story's kind of done. So, another Ant-Man film was kind of was supposed to bring us into the new multiverse era, but it really wasn't that important in the grand scheme of things. Plus, it heavily featured the diverse actor that they were pushing, and obviously that we can see how that's worked out with the whole Kang situation and the abandoning of Jonathan Majors, who was a great actor, but was not really correct for the role that he was being asked to play. And I think that's really what happened. And my issue with the idea that this actor's being held to a higher standard, or Nia DaCosta's being held to a higher standard, is just laughable. There is a standard, and if you don't achieve, you will be judged by that standard. Now, one of the things I'd say about Peyton Reed is nobody was saying the things about him at the beginning of his at the beginning of the marketing cycle. Nobody was saying he is a true talent, a visionary that's going to change cinema. He's going to change the narrative, because the media is not interested. He's a white man, so. Well, I don't know if he's a white man, to be honest, but I'm assuming he is because he didn't get all that coverage. But that's the idea. I don't know anything about Peyton Reed. I haven't had him thrust into my life. I haven't been told that if I don't support his projects that I'm a thing, an ist or a phobe or some other kind of issue that's based in a political agenda rather than actual comic fandom, which the whole thing just leaves me completely bemused. And so the article just annoyed me. I lost interest in it, and I carried on reading it to see where it went, and it just went exactly where you want. It became part of the problem. Granted, it wasn't as bad as some of the stories that I've read. It talked about toxic fandoms. It talked about how men didn't support certain things, and even though the Marvel's turnout was 65% men, men continue to be the problem in every situation that involves female-led projects. And racism is always the issue why a film is panned. But I think the article kind of answered its own questions in between the lines. And I think it's something that I saw in comics. So to give you a little bit of background in terms of where I'm coming at from Captain Marvel, I've read a few stories. I during this, I think it was the Heroic Age, storylines where the Avengers were coming back. We had the Secret Avengers, was just tying up. I can't remember what year that was. I started to see Miss Marvel appearing, and I didn't really understand her very well. I didn't twig who she was. I just assumed she was that woman that Rogue got her powers from. She came back. Now, I was a huge fan of the X-Men, so for years the X-Men was exclusively the thing I bought before I started getting into wider comics. And even I didn't know that Rogue got her powers from Captain Marvel, or Miss Marvel as she was then known. And it was all like a question of going back through floppies and getting back issues to try and fill in the gaps of the collections that I didn't have, because I'd started off at 243, issue 243, and that was of the Uncanny X-Men. That was just before Jim Lee came on, and I think it was still had Chris Claremont. But when Jim Lee and Chris Claremont came on together, I was like, this is brilliant. So that was for me the highlight of my comic collecting career, was when I discovered Jim Lee and Chris Claremont's writing. I absolutely adored it. And Rogue was one of my favorite characters. Now, modern marketing would tell me that if I don't go to see the Captain Marvel sequel, I am something. And this seems like it's come from the movies, and I'm sure it has, because we can see Hollywood pretending that it's not, the same cynical entity that it always was. It's playing this game of, this is the social justice issue that we're rallying around today. Everyone must be seen to be playing and wearing the same fashion items, and we all play in the same ball pit, and we all believe the same things. And Hollywood plays this game. They do it with all sorts of things. They do it with all sorts of things, all sorts of varying issues, and it's kind of sad that you can't be honest about what you actually think or who you want to vote for and all these things. But back in the old days, you didn't talk about these things, but everything is on the table for discussion nowadays. So that's the world we live in. But this specific type of marketing was always, well, not always, no. It came in comics. It came in when Miss Marvel came back, I think. It was around the same time. There were, obviously, the internet by that point had become, a place to chat about your passion and your interests. And from what I gather, the Marvel had a lack of solo female characters. They didn't have anyone that was like Wonder Woman. And so they were desperately looking for that Wonder Woman that they could then bring into the then new MCU. They were desperate, and so that's how we ended up with the situation of the all new, all different Marvel, and that the comic fans rejecting certain characters created a hysteria. There's no other word for it, in the Marvel offices. And it was here we began to see that lifelong fans of certain books were being insulted by the creatives at Marvel. When I say creatives, I use it loosely. It was also about this same time that a group known as the White Queens, a group of homosexual and lesbians, gays and lesbians who had gotten into Marvel and had created a toxic work environment, had began to have huge influence over the industry. And, even though they were only creative adjacent, they had a great deal of power. Now, I don't want to get into it, to be honest, but it is something that I am aware of, and it's something that I heard about many years ago, and it explains a lot. Failure to enjoy a title with a character that you didn't like being forced into a leading role in it meant that you were a bigot. And we see that now in wider society, in all areas of society. Any objection is met with a cynical response. You know, it can't be because this character's not interesting. It must be because you're racist. It doesn't make sense. And it's the same exact thing with Captain Marvel. Now, I don't have a Captain Marvel book because I've never liked the character. She's not interesting. Even when she was Miss Marvel, she's not that interesting. Her costume was cool, much cooler when she was Miss Marvel. She looked great. And most people accepted the fact that she looked great. What she needed to be Marvel's Wonder Woman wasn't being thrust into every title or pushed into stories that didn't involve her or making her Spider-Man's girlfriend for a while. What she needed was interesting stories that tested her and pushed her. Now, I've been a fan of comic books since I was 9 years old. I love superhero comic books from that age. Maybe I was just a misogynistic, sexist 9-year-old who only liked male heroes not because I wanted to be, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, but because I was a misogynistic, latent homophobic bigot. And I think really clearly when I look back over my life that I haven't read a lot of books by feminist readers. Again, that must mean something, right? Well, this is when you look at it that way, it turns into an absurdity. It doesn't make any sense. You can't be judged by the things you do not do. And you can't be judged by the things that you have done. It's just something that happens. You're either interested in it or you're not. If you're interested in it and you read it and you don't like it, lesson learned. Most of the time, you don't hold it against somebody when they don't like something, but we do now. And this is something that began in small communities, and not just comics. This was in other areas of society. It's like you're either them or you're us. And it was this kind of confrontational thing. And it's like fashion, it's like street culture. It's tribalism. It's what it is, essentially. And so any kid nowadays that's growing up in this would is being told to educate themselves. That one really annoys me. Be kind, also an annoying term, usually used in a way to stop any thoughts, to stop anybody from saying what they actually do or don't like, by constantly having to play this game where they evaluate things. They have to evaluate things using an academic model. It's like, you don't have to do that. If you don't like Captain Marvel, don't read her books. Even the author of Captain Marvel said that. So that's how it should be, right? But it's not. If you don't read it, well, you're a bigot. If you don't like it, don't read it. But if you don't read it, you're a bigot. How does that work? That kind of marketing just annoys me. And it's damaged the industry, not because comics are doing worse than they've ever done. Comics are a medium. Manga, comics, graphic novels, all part of the same medium. The industry part of it comes where they get sold. And so, yeah, the industry will always continue in some form. There will always be words with pictures put together, and that's comics. So what might change is whether Marvel and DC remain the two top companies. And I think that's the issue, is that Marvel and DC have lost any cultural significance. Like Disney, they've lost trust in the market, and they almost seem to have abandoned actually putting out a good book. They're so interested in making a new Wonder Woman for their line that they can have on lunchboxes and tote bags and various other lifestyle products that they want to sell to women, that they are absolutely pushing it into every comic book. They are making every comic book homogenous, but they are saying that they are diverse. Now, Rogue, I didn't put just Rogue here just out of random because Rogue and Captain Marvel are very closely linked. Captain Marvel is the source of Rogue's power. In that 90s Rogue, invulnerable, super strong member of the X-Men, cursed with never to be able to touch people. She was a compelling, interesting character. She could go into loads of different areas completely naturally because she was charming, because she was funny, because she was strong. But she longed for something. She longed for human connection, and that was the thing that you felt for her. But she existed happily without that until Gambit arrived on the scene. And that dynamic between Gambit and Rogue is what made the X-Men so special in the late 90s. It was a really cool story that, like, the X-Men had always been dominated by Cyclops and Jean, and it was annoying. And Cyclops, Jean, Wolverine love triangle, I've never liked it. I've always hated it. I mean, Wolverine, why does he like Jean? I mean, why is he in love with her? It's a really weird, simpy behaviour from a man who has bedded some of the most gorgeous women in the Marvel Universe. He doesn't need her. I suspect it makes more sense to me that Wolverine's never been interested in Jean. He just does it to annoy Scott. That would be a great reveal, but they always like to lean on this idea that Wolverine just had to have Jean. Anyway, that's why I always thought it was dumb. Wolverine don't need anybody. He kills people all day long. He's not bothered. So, yeah, never made much sense to me. So when Gambit and Rogue were a thing, that made much more sense to me. He was dark. He was mysterious. He might have been a bad guy. When the guy from the future comes and says he knows who he is, man, that was just another level. You know, that was another level for me. I thought those stories were brilliant. When Bishop came in, it tipped everything. But it was done in a character-driven way. And that's what I really, really loved about the X-Men back in those days. And Rogue, you know, I first came across Rogue in a John Romita story during Secret Wars when I was about 9 or 10, 10 or 11 or 12, I can't remember. But she was menacingly staring out of a window looking at Wolverine and Storm talking. Was it Wolverine? Storm and Magneto, sorry, were talking about Rogue and discussing what to do with her. And saying she was from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So I was like, wow, so she's a villain who's made good. Interesting. But it was a cool story, and it was a tie-in with the Beyonder. It became completely something separate. I think Rachel Summers turns up or whatever. But just the image of Rogue staring out of the window as a silhouette, that burned into my mind. That made me want to know who she was. And then so on, and so when I started reading the X-Men comics and I saw she was this super cool character. Who could fly like Superman, and she was super strong. She wore a cool costume. Like, she'd change her costume. And when, you know, my favourite costume that she has is the one that she wore with in X-Men, where she had the jacket and the yellow and green. That was awesome. And so, yeah, she became a favourite of mine straight from the get-go. And there was a thing on Twitter the other day, they were asking, who's your top 3 X-Men? Who's the top 3 big hitters of the X-Men? And everyone said Wolverine, Storm, and Cyclops. But for me, the question should have been, who's the best? And for me, that's who's the most interesting. And it's Rogue, Wolverine, and Gambit. And that for me is something that I just believe today. Like, you might not like Gambit, Wolverine, and Rogue. You might not like Gambit and Rogue. You might think that they misused, and they have been misused a lot. But they are interesting just as characters, not the weird power things and the fluctuations they keep doing with their power set and other things. There was an interesting human story, you know. Gambit wanted to make a new life. He met a girl. He really fell in love with her. She can't kiss him because she couldn't kill him, but he ain't taking no for an answer. He's coming on strong. She's getting annoyed with him. She resists him. He leaves. She finds out he's married. Brilliant stuff. I mean, I love that. And I like the fact that Gambit wasn't a simp. That's just added bonus. You know, they tried to write him that way, and I just find it annoying, but it's just, he's a player. He's a dude. And that's the kind of guy that we look up to. And the fact that a girl likes that we like that girl. That is Rogue. What they've done with Captain Marvel is the exact opposite of that. You know, people say she's devoid of a personality. I don't think she's devoid of a personality. She is stoic in many of the ways that a man is. But it makes for a very unappealing female character to men. We don't like that. We don't like women like that. We respect women like that, fine. We work with women like that all the time. But we don't care about it. It's not something that attracts us to that person. And this is another thing. Attractiveness versus beauty. Carol Danvers is a beautiful woman. She's not attractive. Do you see? There is a difference. It's the same thing with an actor. An actor doesn't necessarily have to be beautiful to be an actor, but they do have to be attractive. And what I mean by that is attraction, bringing people to you. That is not Carol Danvers. She's not written that way. And so it doesn't matter that you put a beautiful actress like Brie Larson in, she will always come across as cold and aloof and not inviting. And that's exactly what went wrong with the first Captain Marvel film. But it doesn't go wrong if your audience is women. It only goes wrong if your audience is men. And for me, one of the things that kind of offset that was the Nick Fury, Carol Danvers dynamic. I actually kind of like that in the first film. But the first film was a huge disappointment. Even though I was looking forward to it, I was hoping that they would put some of Rogue's personality into the Carol Danvers character. But when they didn't do that, I wondered how they were going to make up for that lack. And that's what Nick Fury did. They made him the comic relief. Young Nick Fury meeting a superhero for the first time. Great idea. But it was badly fumbled. The Kree home world wasn't set up correctly. The Annette Bening as the Captain Marvel, as the original Captain Marvel, that was unnecessary. But again, you know, I didn't have a problem with that per se. It's only in hindsight that I think about it. It's just like wasted opportunity. And there was the tropes coming in that lots of people in the YouTube sphere who don't like, you know, channels like Nerdrotic. I don't know how to label them, but I watch both. I watch all channels that talk about comics. So I watch a guy called Organized Chaos or something. I've been watching him recently. His take on the Captain Marvels was quite interesting. I watch Nerdrotic. I watch, you know, Ryan Kinnell and those people too. So I might have just made lots of enemies there, but I always try to keep a balance. I don't like to judge. I don't like to pick sides. But one of the things that I do find quite difficult is this notion of comic fans don't like women who are in non-traditional roles. And Rogue is non-traditional. We knew she was raised by people who were supposed to be lesbians back in the 90s. So it didn't matter. And this is what I find so disingenuous about it. It's you shoehorn a character into a story that's not meant for them. Then you come down on the fans for not enjoying the story. And this is going back to the original point I was trying to make, is that now that we have the internet, now that we have media taking an interest in our hobbies, this rhetoric is going around and around and around. And it's becoming quite toxic and it's becoming poisonous, but it's not a toxic fandom. This is the thing. The media keep telling us it's a toxic fandom. It's not a toxic fandom. It's a toxic marketing strategy. Because if somebody comes over and kicks you in the shin and you get mad and go to punch them, and then they take a video of you and then use it in an advert for shin guards, that's toxic. And that's essentially what they're doing. They are upsetting people with the intent to get that person to say stuff that they can then push back against. And it's just basically all it is it's marketing that is related to tribalism. Now, as comic fans, if anyone is out there who, don't matter which end of the sphere you're on, if you're a comic fan, all you want is a consistent, concise story that meets your tastes. You are not doing anything wrong by not enjoying a certain character in your story. that character might not need to be there. And that is down to Marvel trying to create or fabricate a Wonder Woman that they can stick on a feminist product from the lifestyle brand that they've become. They're trying to make something happen in the comics, and we've seen instances of this. It's the Kamala Khan Miss Marvel has been let down by it. The only one out of the whole cast of the Marvels that has any integrity was Monica Rambeau. She was the leader of the X-Men. Leader of the Avengers, sorry, in the comics. She was a beloved character. People enjoyed her. But they completely destroyed her by tying her origin in with whatever the hell that was in WandaVision. It's infuriating. And yes, Tiona Paris is actually a cool Captain Marvel. She could pull it off. But she has been lumbered with an absolute dead dog of a story. And it all revolves around this character, joyless Captain Marvel that we've got. It just... I don't know what to say. But basically, if you choose not to read a comic book, you choose not to watch a film because you don't like the characters, you are not a bigot. If you go online and call the actress names, then maybe there's an argument for it. You might be. And you should probably not do that. But at the same time, people get passionate about their hobbies. They're getting annoyed because they keep seeing this marketing manipulation coming in. Tell good stories. Don't try to create an IP. Don't try to do what DC's doing. They've got Wonder Woman. How are we going to get our female? What are we going to do? It's annoying. They don't want to go with Rogue because Rogue's X-Men. It's annoying that Wolverine's X-Men. And see, but the thing about it is, it's like they want that character to be free and clear of all other brands. That's why Wolverine got put into all the other teams. It's like, if we can somehow water down the fact that he's an X-Man, then we can kind of call him his own person, like Spider-Man. Spider-Man always said, no, I don't want to be on a team. No, I don't want to be on a team. But now look what's happened to him. He's Spider-Verse. This character is being vandalized. This is what they do. They're so keen to license these products, get more product out, that they butcher the stories. And that's the thing that the fans push back against. There's nothing toxic about that. That is natural. So I would say, in closing, whenever you feel an argument coming on, whenever you think to yourself, like, who's to blame for this? It's not anybody in the community or the fans. It's the creators, it's the comic companies, the publishers that have abdicated comics and gone into lifestyle brand. The big two, unfortunately. They've abdicated their position, and that's what's making it look like the comic industry is dying. Because people go in for their Marvel and DC comics. They get that from their pull list. That hurts indies. So there's never been more indies on a shelf in a comic book, but there's never been less customers because of Marvel and DC. And so this is the situation that we're in. It's a toxic death spiral. It will resolve. It will find its balance. But at the moment, it's very difficult to be a comic fan and avoid this poisonous rhetoric. So I'll just say to you today, you're allowed to like whatever you like. You can read whatever you want to read, and no one can call you for it. And that's all I wanted to say today. So, that said, my comic book, Intrepid, is almost finished. It's going out to print in the next week or so. I'm super excited, and keep an eye out. I think there'll be another trailer. I'm not quite sure how that's going to be marketed, but yeah, on the Narrowbox channel. And I'll be making my own YouTube channel that talks about comics, and I'll go into things like I've talked about today. I've got strong opinions, and it is something that I'm very passionate about. I love comics, and I want to do something a little bit different. I don't want to focus on US comics. I want to try and bring in more international ones, and I'm trying to figure out a way to make a connection with the bande dessinée people as well, because I'd like to start bringing some of that stuff in, because I started reading some of the French translations by, is it Cinefex or something like that? They're a publisher that creates books from French bande dessinée. So yeah, I'd like to do much more about the comics medium, much broader spectrum. So it'd be a really nerdy channel that talks about comics in the philosophical sense. But yeah, once I do that, I'll let you know, and this is the place to do it. I'll be making more videos for Narrowbox if they don't stop me. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you soon. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye.